Hi, I'm Anne Bowditch, and today we're covering part 2 of my anxiety relief series. And this is about the inner voice and how that inner voice is so related to anxiety and contributing to it. Before we get going, just a reminder to hit the subscribe button if you want to receive updates and, of course, view the other videos in the series. That inner voice, it's that running commentary that we all have inside our minds. Let's face it, we all think every day. And we can think about so many different things. What you can think about is endless. And most people have the sort of thoughts of what can we have for tea, what's on TV tonight, things you must remember, those thoughts of I need a holiday. Maybe you see somebody wearing something nice and you think, oh, I like that. So we all have everyday thoughts. And people that do not suffer with anxiety will have lots of these very average, everyday thoughts. But of course, someone that suffers with anxiety, the proportion of these basic everyday thoughts is tiny because the mind is overtaken by anxiety. And when someone experiences anxiety, those thoughts are overtaken by those anticipated problems and disasters. And believe it or not, this is actually your mind's attempt to look after you and to keep you safe. It's hard to believe, isn't it, that when you're in utter despair with anxiety, that your mind's trying to do its best for you because it wants to know what the worst case scenario is so that your mind can plan and get you out of it. But then what tends to happen is by conjuring up that worst case scenario, you think, well, I can't cope with that. And that then causes the anxiety. And these are quite common anxiety thoughts. A very common one for someone particularly who has had a panic attack, but also sometimes for those that haven't, is what if I have a panic attack? It's that fear. I've known people who come in to see me as clients with anxiety, and it's a huge fear that they're going to have a panic attack. And in fact, they've almost forgotten what that initial thing is that they were anxious about because now they're actually anxious about having a panic attack. Thinking we've upset someone can make us feel really anxious because a lot of anxiety sufferers are people pleasers and they want people to think well of them. And there's a bit more info on that on my earlier video, part 1 on beliefs. So if you want to view that, please do so. Again, I can't do that. I can't do all sorts of different things. So you convince yourself you can. It might be something that a lot of people take for granted. It may be going to the shops. I've known people unable to go to the shops because their anxiety is so severe. It might be a social occasion. It might be speaking up. There's loads of things that most of us at some time think we can't do. But again, with anxiety, it's a very common one to think that you cannot do something. The obvious, what if something happens? What if this happens? What if that happens? And that's the biggie, isn't it? You're constantly running that over. Of course you think you won't cope. That's part of what anxiety is, telling you can't cope. And also that dreaded feeling of feeling useless, hopeless. You think bad of yourself because apart from anything else, you get frustrated with yourself for actually having the anxiety. You get frustrated with yourself for having those thoughts. And you do despair of yourself sometimes. So you probably have maybe a few key anxiety thoughts that you're familiar with, or particularly as we talk about these things will come to light. You'll realize maybe that there's certain thoughts that you have on a very, very regular basis. But these are a bit of an example of some anxiety type thoughts. And that inner voice, oh my goodness, how hard can that inner voice be of ourselves? It can be so very critical. We tell ourselves we're hopeless. Again, that frustration kicks in. Why am I so pathetic? Why Can't I just get over this? Why do I have to think in this way? What is wrong with me? And again, that I'm useless. It's a very harsh and tough inner voice. So that then brings our self-confidence down, it brings our self-esteem down, and we feel worse. So that inner voice, the common behavior, it can be very self-critical, as I've already pointed out. What are those common self-critical thoughts that you have? There's probably a few that are very, very common. You have them every day of the week. Of course, that anxiety in a voice, it's searching for problems, isn't it? It's looking for those things that are going to go wrong. Oh yes, that inner voice, it likes to overanalyze situations. You'll run over maybe a conversation that you had with somebody, and by the end of running it over in your mind, you'll convince yourself that you've upset them. Or you'll look at a situation that's not even happened yet, and you'll analyze it and analyze it over and over again. And as you analyze it each time, it gets worse in your mind. Of course, that inner voice is part of that creation of those negative scenarios. This is just the most awful thing. I'll never achieve that. I'll never get out of that. I'll never manage that. And that catastrophizing. Oh, it always happens to me. Does it always? Why am I so useless? Are you really useless? What are the things that you can do really well? Life is just awful. Is life awful? Or are there things that you do enjoy in life? So be aware of that over-catastrophizing behaviour. All of those what ifs, and that is the big anxiety thing, isn't it? All of the what ifs. What if this happens? What if that happens? What if she says that? What if I said that? What if so-and-so dies? What if this and that and the other? It's all of those what ifs, and that is a big bugbear for anxiety sufferers. And as I've said, this is the brain's attempt to keep us safe. But the truth is, this is ruining your peace of mind and enjoyment of life. So even though it's your mind trying to do its best for you, it's actually making you feel awful and feel worse. So it's not doing you any favours. Why not write down some of those negative thoughts? Because sometimes actually by writing down these things, you can begin to view them in another way and maybe assess them in a more positive way. What are those self-critical comments? It's really important, particularly with those self-critical comments, that you do recognise them and you start to make some changes, start to prove them wrong. So just begin to have that awareness. Where are you constantly being negative? Where are you constantly looking for problems, for things to go wrong? So yeah, that inner voice, it does tend to create problems for anxiety sufferers. And that is the point, isn't it? How many of those problems actually happen? And even in the very, very rare case they do happen, chances are they still don't happen in the way that you are expecting them to. And probably chances are nowhere near as bad as you are expecting those things to be. So that inner voice convinces you that you cannot cope. It convinces you that you can't go to the shops, you cannot ski down that slope or go in a chairlift, you can't get on that flight. It's telling you all these things, none of which will be true, but it convinces you. And it's running over those negative scenarios. It wants to talk to you about them. It's trying to find a solution, but it keeps focusing on the negative and it can't get over that hurdle. It really is like that negative is a massive high hurdle that you can just not jump over. And that results in those awful anxiety symptoms, the sort of shortness of breath, the clammy hands, the heart beating fast, the tightness of the digestive system, all of those symptoms that I'm sure you're familiar with. I won't go through them all now. It's putting you in that fight or flight response. What it's doing with that fight or flight response is it's saying to you, you need to get out of here or you need to fight. Well, we don't tend to just fight in this day and age. We're not being attacked by a wild animal. And often we feel we can't get out of a situation. So we're stuck, and that's why we get those anxiety symptoms, because we're stuck where we are. And addressing that inner voice can be a huge part of helping you to take charge of that anxiety, to calm down that mind. And of course, start with those self-critical comments, because I've known a lot of anxiety sufferers, and a very common theme is they're tough on themselves, really tough. So when you notice that you are being negative towards yourself, start to counteract that with a positive thought. So the example I use is, I can remember years ago reading some book on confidence, and one of the things that it said in the book was about the inner voice actually. This was way before I was a therapist. And I thought, oh, well, I'll be aware of that inner voice. What am I saying to myself? And for instance, if I dropped a glass, I might say, oh, you're an idiot. Probably much worse, but we'll go with you're an idiot. And then what I started to do was I'd still automatically call myself an idiot if I did something like that. But I would then add in, but it's not a big deal. People drop glasses. It doesn't matter. It's not the end of the world. And then over time, what I noticed happen was, by giving that inner voice less attention and energy, it started to fade. And then I'd drop a glass and I'd go, no big deal. So it is something that requires constant effort, if you like. It's not something that will change overnight. But if you keep working on it, and it's not going to take your time to adjust that inner voice, to plant something positive in there, it's not going to take any more of your day up to do that. You're thinking anyway, so put in some positive thoughts this time. So let's look at some examples. So normally you might say, I'm so useless. And then you can counteract that. These are just examples, so come up with your own. You might say, well, that's just not true. I can do so many things well. And then make a note. Say the things to yourself that you can do well. It's really important that you do this. Why can't I do anything right? That's another one, isn't it? So harsh on yourself. And actually, you need to correct yourself, because you do plenty right. So say to yourself, I do plenty right. Only this morning, I completed a really complicated letter and my boss was really happy. So again, just personalize it, make it relevant to you. What did you do really well that you've not given yourself the credit that you deserve for? I don't fit in. And actually that too is not true. My family and partner love me. I have some really good friends. Plenty of people like me. Again, you've been harsh on yourself. Be kinder. So start to counteract those day-to-day negative thoughts with something positive, because you're then getting into thinking more positively. It is becoming second nature. Over time, the negativity will fade away because you're not giving it the attention and the energy. So just using it on really simple things, and this is one of my sort of favourite examples. It might just seem really, really basic, but it is getting you to think positively. And if you start basic, you can move on as you get better at it. So when it rains, rather than saying I hate the rain, say, well, the plants get watered and we're so lucky to have rain. Because let's face it, not Everybody does. It's so easy to think in a negative way. And again, somebody might not be able to meet you and you're really upset. So you'd say, typical, Joe can't make it tonight. And then you say, actually, I'm going to have a great night. I'm going to pamper myself, put on some relaxing music, have a long soak in the bath and a good film. So you've turned something that might have been quite negative, where you might have gone home and felt sorry for yourself and upset, into something really positive, creating a really nice experience for yourself. And this is what you're doing. You're retraining your mind. You've been training your mind in a negative way for a long time, possibly all of your life. So it will take a bit of effort to retrain it into something positive. But as I said, it does not take up any more of your time. So what is the excuse not to do this? There isn't one. So as this becomes second nature, the negativity will start to fall away. And once you master these, you can then start to question those worries. You can ask yourself, is this really happening now? And that's the way that I've handled worries in the past. And actually my answer is always no. And then you can think, well, what is the best that can happen? Again, you're retraining your brain. Chances are you don't think about the best that can happen because of your mind's attempt to keep you safe. You're constantly focusing on the negative, but start to explore what is the best. If I went out to that party, what is the best that could happen? Well, you could have a great time. If I went on that ski slope, what's the best that could happen? Well, I'd ski down it and I'd feel amazing. Notice how much your energy changes, and this is why I talk occasionally in terms of energy, because it's so important. When you're negative, your energy is all down and droopy and miserable. When you're being positive, that energy is much more up there. It's much more enthusiastic, and it makes you feel like you can do things. And the truth is, you can do things. And that's true. As this becomes second nature, that negativity starts to fall away. But it does need that practice. And by doing this, you will stop giving the negativity attention and energy. Because it's the attention and the energy that keeps it coming back. Think of it in terms of maybe a dog. If a dog came up to you with a stick and you took the stick of it and you threw the stick for the dog will grab the stick and it run back to you and it would want you to throw the stick again. If you didn't pick the stick up, the dog would probably go off and maybe find someone else to give a stick to. So don't pick up the negativity stick. Sometimes things can appear too simple to make a difference, but please do not ignore the simple techniques, because every single thing you do to help may make a few percent difference. It may make 0.5% difference. It may make 10 or 15% difference. But if you start to add up all the little changes that you have an opportunity to make, then those percentages grow and you start to be in charge of your mind. And that anxiety starts to go away because you're not picking up the anxiety stick and throwing it for it again. And it does not have to be the anxiety way. You can start today. You can start to make these simple changes today. What's stopping you? Nothing. Only if you put the stopper on it. If you pick up the negativity stick, then you are putting a stop on changing. And why would you do that to yourself? So, the truth. You are extremely capable. I may not know you personally, but I have seen enough anxiety sufferers to know that they are every bit as capable as everyone else. And actually, sometimes they're even more amazing. Isn't this just so true? Most things you worry about don't happen. They're usually and often based on past experiences, but directed towards the future. So you take those past experiences and you think, well, that was awful. What if that happens again? Chances are it won't ever happen again. And that is also so much the truth, that you can deal with far more than you think you can. We all can. People are incredibly resourceful, incredibly tough and capable. And in the very rare situation where something bad happens, you'll deal with it because you can, because you're capable of dealing with it. I come across this little phrase from Henry Ford so many times, probably because it's just so relevant to all of us in life. If you think you can do a thing or think you cannot do a thing, you are right. Similarly, if you tell yourself you can do something or tell yourself you cannot, you're going to be right. You can convince yourself one way or another. If you tell yourself when you're standing at the top of that ski slope, I can't do it, I cannot do it, you'll convince yourself you cannot. If you tell yourself, I can do this, I'm going to do this, again, notice how the energy changes, then you're going to do it. Henry Ford was right. As I said, I'm author of The Energy of Anxiety. I do talk about the inner voice in there. There's a number of exercises linked to the inner voice. And there's also lots of other information and perspectives in there. Thank you very much for watching. I love making these videos. I enjoy sharing information. And please do subscribe to follow more in the series.